Hey guys, welcome back to the Jedi In Exile. I am joined by my, as ever, lovely co-host, It's Tats. We've got a new, start of a new segment for you in this video, haven't we, Matt? We've been, This is what we kind of spoke about initially. These are the kind of debates that we used to have. So we're doing a who would win, and this is going to be the start, like I say, of a new kind of segment. So today we're going to be debating who would win in a duel, and we'll clarify what we mean by that in a moment, between Mace Windu and Anakin Skywalker. Now, to clarify, we're going to go for the strongest points of their life in using the Force. So for me, that's Mace Windu probably dueling Palpatine, height of his powers, etc. And for Anakin, I'm going to say Anakin Skywalker, when he becomes Darth Vader, he's no longer Anakin. So we're talking probably Dark Jedi Anakin. He's walloped off Windu's hand.
Pre-suit,
yeah, I love that. So, now it's not just a lightsaber duel, it's a full-on, fight to the death. It's canon, because we did have this debate that if we're going on non-canon, then the 2003 Cartoon Network Clone Wars, which you can see our review of on this channel if you like and subscribe. If it was based on that, then Mace Windu would win hands down. So we're going on just canon. So I think we're on conflicting sides of this argument, Matt, from discussions we've had before. So just talk to me. So first of all, just tell me who you think would win, but don't give me any reasons.
So I would go Anakin, right?
Okay. This is good. This is going to be interesting because most of the time we agree on things, apart from the sequel trilogy. I'm going to go Mace.
See, I thought that would be the case.
Yeah, I go backwards and forwards on a lot of things, but so Mace Windu is mastery of the Force and lightsabers.
Let's jump in, right? So let's talk about out and out lightsaber combat.
Yeah, so I feel like Mace has an advantage here because of his lightsaber form, and I feel like this is where Anakin brings himself almost to a par of Windu because he taps into that like dark side energy. But Mace Windu can, don't get me wrong, he doesn't go to the dark side of the Force, but he certainly channels that kind of inner energy, doesn't he, with his lightsaber form? It's Form 5, 7. Isn't it?
I think it's Form 7. Yeah. So Form 7, which is the one that he essentially created, right? Which is the whole him kind of like balancing on the knife edge of not quite tapping into the dark side, but almost tapping into the dark side.
Well, I think that's what enables him to obviously beat Palpatine, isn't it? You see that when they're both, like their lightsabers are clashed and you see them both like grimacing. Mace has this evil like look about him, and he obviously can, it's not a lot of Jedi can tap into that side of the Force, because once you're in that, you then spiral out of control. So I think the fact that if we were basing it solely on lightsaber combat, I do think Mace is actually a hands down winner. I think Anakin's whole mastery of the Force and being skilled with that brings it a little bit more back to par.
So I think, just to counter that slightly, I get what you're saying, and I think that all of those are valid points with Mace, and I agree that he is, up there. But I think you've got to think that Anakin faces off against Dooku and wins.
An old man, but yeah.
He is an old man, but he's also notorious as one of the best lightsaber duelists within the Jedi Order, and then the fact that he then obviously turned to the dark side. It's also a lightsaber duelist that went toe-to-toe with Yoda, if you like Dooku and Yoda. So then for Anakin to be able to beat Dooku, I think is very impressive. That's kind of the basis of the main part of my argument. That, and then I think that if Obi-Wan doesn't have the high ground on Mustafar...
Yeah, I was going to say, part of the rules as well is we're not fighting on a volcanic planet.
So I think that's part of it, right? Because the whole reason that it was Anakin's arrogance that lost him that fight, not his actual skills with the lightsaber.
I think when we talk about obviously lightsaber dueling, in my opinion, Mace Windu is better than Anakin. I think the second side of it is mastery of the Force, and that's where the Dooku Yoda fight reminds me of. Obviously, they try and use the Force to out skill each other. And I think with Mace, the fact that he repels Palpatine's scream, so I know everybody laughs and jokes about Kit Fisto and the other Jedi, like Sace Tin, the other Jedi Masters who get killed within like 2 strokes of Palpatine. That's because Palpatine lets out this like Sith scream, which like, I suppose for want of a better word, like dazzles them.
Like paralyzes them.
Yeah, and Mace was able to avoid that. And obviously go toe-to-toe with one of the best, Sith Lords in 1,000 years. I think the fact that he defeats him, I think that Mace is clearly seen as the strongest Jedi in the Order, because Anakin says in Attack of the Clones, I believe he says, yeah, he's talking to Padme, and he says, don't get me wrong, Obi-Wan is a great master. He's as wise as Master Yoda and as powerful as Master Windu. So Master Windu is seen as obviously like the strongest Jedi of his age. And I think the fact that he beats Palpatine, the fact that, so not many Jedi have even faced Sith Lords, the fact that he can do that, the fact that I think, and I was going to talk on Anakin's overconfidence / arrogance, I think Mace would actually pick him apart, and the fact that Anakin loses to Obi-Wan, Dooku chops off, I know he eventually kills Dooku, but Dooku chops off an arm. I think that Anakin doesn't have...
But Dooku chops off his arm when
as an apprentice,
not at the height of his powers.
No, and I understand that. I think that Anakin, at the height of his powers, we still know obviously he hasn't tapped into that yet, can't shoot Force Lightning. I think that would be a massive advantage. Obviously, that's basically what stopped Mace from killing Palpatine so quickly, was the Force Lightning, because Mace had to defend himself. So I feel like all of that combined, and I think if Anakin wasn't so arrogant, then he potentially could win.
I think if we're talking Force powers, I mean, some people in the comments are probably going to absolutely pick me apart here, but Anakin had the highest midichlorian count, like, known ever, right? And so that obviously has a direct correlation with strength of the Force and all of that kind of stuff. That was kind of the science behind it all. So therefore, in my eyes, by default, he would essentially be the strongest with the Force. I think what you're essentially drifting into is those kind of extra bits that we don't really have a category for, right? But those like weird extra little bits, which I think, I take your point, his arrogance definitely plays a part. We saw him lose to Obi-Wan because of it. He lost to Dooku in Attack of the Clones because of it, because he rushed him and didn't really think about what he was doing. I feel like, and I know we're not talking about Vader, we're talking about Anakin. But
yeah, because I just want to add a caveat there. If it was Vader, I would have a different answer.
Yeah, so
but I don't think Anakin has yet tapped into that power yet.
And I think that if we're talking about Anakin at the height of his power, and it would be post Kenobi, like Obi-Wan Kenobi fight on Mustafar, I think he probably would have learnt from that, and therefore the arrogance doesn't come into play a little bit. But I totally understand.
I know that Vader loses to Obi-Wan in the Kenobi show, so 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. But I actually feel like he would defeat Mace as Vader, as tapping into that, like,
that's
the
a completely
full
different
power of the dark side. But
that's
yeah, I know we've just ruined a different video. But I think that Anakin, he's obviously, he feels so powerful. He probably doesn't know how to use it because he's kept that anger down for so long.
And he has a lot of resentment and everything, doesn't he?
Yeah, to suddenly have it unleashed. I mean, who knows? The fact that if Anakin and Mace had a duel, Mace is the one Jedi who probably Anakin hates the most. So when he talks about, like, I see through the lies of the Jedi, I don't fear the dark side as you do, he's probably talking about Mace, because Mace is the one. We see it in the Clone Wars, we see it in the non-canon books, we see it in the New Brotherhood book as well. Mace just does not like Anakin.
No,
Anakin knows that.
Him, doesn't he?
Absolutely. So he clearly didn't want Anakin to be trained, from the beginning was like not Team Anakin. So I think Anakin facing him maybe would be spurned on, but also I think that anger would overtake him and Mace would be able to use that against
psychological
him.
Games.
Absolutely.
I take your point. So I guess let's try and come to some
I spoke to my wife. I asked my wife the question before we started filming. I said who would win, and I basically had to say Samuel L. Jackson or Anakin Skywalker. so she understood who it was. And she thought long and hard about it. And she said, I think Mace, but she's like, I feel like that's maybe because he's Samuel L. Jackson. And then I had to explain. She was like, how did Mace Windu actually die? And I said, well, Anakin like walloped his hand off and then Palpatine like lightning. She's like, well, Anakin's already beat him then. And I had to explain. I was like, no.
That's
he
not
blindsided him.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, but he still beat him. I was like, no.
Not in a fair fight. So let's try and come to some kind of, I guess, conclusion on this. So
long fight. They're both going to be sweaty, but Mace walks out the winner.
So I'm happy to kind of concede that potentially lightsaber mastery and all of that kind of stuff, that Mace just sits.
It's all down to Mace's lightsaber form, like the fact that he can tap into the dark side and he's controlled.
I think it's close.
Yeah, I think Anakin's strength with the lightsaber dueling, as like Dark Jedi Anakin will call him, like I think his strength is his power that he's got, but it's untamed. So that can be good in some respects, but I feel like with lightsaber fights, that the fact that Mace has that power, but that control, I think control is so important. Like the Jedi Order teaches about control, obviously to stop people, going down the path to the dark side. But I think that control is just sets Mace apart.
So I will concede 1-0 to Mace, just right.
Yeah.
Force-wise, I'm still firmly sitting in the Anakin's the strongest Jedi on record for mastery of the Force. Then tie that in with the fact that he's now fully fallen to the dark side, so then has that as a way to back him up. Purely Force power versus Force power, I can't agree any way otherwise than it's Anakin.
I don't know though, because I suppose in canon we haven't really seen too much of Mace's,
and that's why I think you have to go for it.
Power. I mean, there's been a few episodes in the Clone Wars where he's done a fair bit, but no, I still feel like you're not part of that, like, I suppose if you want to call it like the trifecta of Yoda, Mace and Obi-Wan, you've got like Yoda who's the wisest, Mace who's the strongest, and Obi-Wan's like a bit of a mixture of the both of them, like the diplomat. There's a reason that Mace is so feared in the Order, like, and he's seen as
I
like...
get that, but Anakin didn't have an opportunity to generate that because he wasn't around long enough to generate that. Like, you've got to think how long Mace has been around and built a reputation. By the time that Anakin got to the point where he would have built a reputation, Order 66 happened, so
Mace,
I don't think you can take that into consideration.
Before Anakin was appointed to the Council, Mace was the youngest ever member of the Council, and the Jedi actually chose him to come on the Council, not Anakin, who was obviously like appointed by Palpatine.
But you can't say that Anakin wouldn't have got there, because you don't know.
Well, the Jedi didn't trust him, but I take your point with that.
At the time.
Oh yeah, eventually. Eventually, Anakin would have been on, but if the events didn't happen, Anakin wouldn't have been the chosen one, because it wouldn't have led him to be Vader to then get rid of the Emperor.
But he was still seen as the chosen one within the prophecy. But for the sake of this, let's say half. So 1.5 Mace, half Anakin, right? Is the current tally.
I hate conceding, but okay.
Well, no, it's not a concession. Like you're saying that you would still say Mace, and I'm saying I would still say Anakin. So that's half a point each. So then we got to think about extraneous variables, like these things that you can't really put a category around. I am willing, based on what we've discussed, to concede that Mace probably has that extra wisdom to be able to...
Yeah, I think he's got that strategic, like, I know how to play him.
Yeah, I think he would definitely capitalise on, like, pushing Anakin's buttons and making him lose control a little bit. So I think that I will concede that probably is, another factor into Mace. So on the scoreboard, I would see it as 2.5 to half. The one thing I would say is how much weighting do you give to extraneous?
To each. Well, because I feel like you have to lightsaber. I feel like that's where probably the battle would be won, is your skill with a lightsaber. And don't get me wrong, Anakin's a very skilled duelist, but I don't know. It's a really difficult one, and I'd be interested to see what people think in the comments, because this is one of those questions. I think you could go either way, and you can make an argument for both, as we've done. And I don't think anybody would say Anakin there's no way Anakin wins that, or there's no way Mace wins that. I think you can genuinely see it going either way. I think the environment is going to make a difference, like you say. If it's like, Anakin only lost that fight with Obi-Wan because he tried to prove to Obi-Wan that he was more powerful, and probably proved to himself he was. And that's where he had this new power, and he thought it was unlimited, where like unlimited power. Sorry, I had to get that in. Like, he didn't have that. There is a limit to everyone's power. As Mace, from being older, being a more experienced Jedi, he will know the limit to his power, so he wouldn't try anything that would maybe be a bit more risky.
It would be an interesting one, and it's not for this conversation because we set out the parameters of this conversation, but it'd be interesting to reassess this from Anakin turned but didn't become Vader, so on a completely level, like maybe similarly aged Mace versus Anakin.
Well, Anakin, after 5 years, I mean, let's say he beats Obi-Wan, he probably tries to kill Palpatine. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He'd be more powerful if he didn't, because he'd learn off Palpatine. So, in like 5 years later, Anakin, which would make him like, 28, 29? He'd be probably unstoppable.
And so I think we wrap this one up by saying I'm happy to concede, for the sake of this conversation, that it probably is Mace, but I think we can both agree that it's a close one, and it's probably one where when you start throwing in different variables about like where it takes place, when it takes place and stuff, it definitely could go either way. You guys let us know down in the comments below if you completely disagree, whether you think we've made valid points, whether you think that some of the points that we've raised are like not relevant at all, because it's always interesting to see, and like Brian said, it's kind of one of those where everybody's going to have an opinion, right? And everybody's going to have different reasons for thinking what they think. So let us know in the comments down below what you think. Whilst you're there, why not hit like? If you're not already subscribed, hit subscribe. You might as well. So thank you guys for all the support. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. As Brian said, we're going to do a few more of these. It's going to be a new little segment on the channel. So yeah, fingers crossed you've liked it. And other than that, guys, we'll see you all real soon in the next one.
May the Force be with you all.